The buzzing phone cut through the darkness like a knife. My eyes snapped open, heavy with sleep, to see the blue light reflecting off the ceiling. Not my phone. Emily's. I turned carefully, watching as my wife's silhouette sat up in our bed. 3 in the morning. Who would be texting her at this hour? Emily grabbed her phone, the screen illuminating her face for just a moment, long enough for me to see her smile. Not the polite smile she'd been giving me lately, but something genuine, something intimate. She slipped out of bed, phone clutched in her hand, and padded softly toward our bathroom. I should have rolled over and gone back to sleep. Instead, something primal and fearful twisted in my gut. I waited until the bathroom door closed, leaving just the thinnest sliver of light escaping through the gap. Moving silently, I crossed the hardwood floor, feeling each cool plank beneath my bare feet. The house was utterly silent. No creaking pipes, no humming refrigerator, nothing to mask my approach. Through the narrow gap, I could see Emily leaning against the marble counter, her face bathed in the harsh light of her phone. She was typing, smiling, biting her lower lip in that way she used to do with me back when we still looked at each other that way. "I miss you too," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "Tomorrow, same place." He'll never know. My chest tightened. Each breath became a conscious effort. I'd been married to Emily for 8 years. I thought I knew everything about her. The way she hummed while cooking, how she always skipped the first chapter of any book, her irrational fear of clowns. But this woman, this secretive, smiling stranger in my bathroom? I didn't know her at all. I retreated to bed before she could catch me, arranging myself into what I hoped looked like sleep. The toilet flushed. A cover, I realized. The sink ran briefly. Then Emily was sliding back into bed, her body warm but somehow more distant than ever. I kept my breathing deep and regular, fighting the urge to confront her, to demand answers. In business, I'd learned that information was everything. Act without it and you lose. So I waited, listened, gathered data. "I love you, baby," Emily murmured in her sleep an hour later. "Last night was incredible." My blood turned to ice. Last night, I'd been in Chicago, closing a deal with investors, calling Emily from my hotel room. Who had she been with? Whose hands had touched my wife while I was building our future? Morning came with cruel brightness. I showered, shaved, dressed for work, all while a storm raged inside me. Emily made coffee, kissed my cheek, asked about my meetings in Chicago. I answered normally, smiled on cue, played my part in this charade of a marriage. "Dinner with Susan tonight," she mentioned casually, buttering her toast. "Girls' night. Don't wait up." Susan. Her college roommate. Or so she claimed. "Have fun," I said, maintaining eye contact, searching for a flicker of guilt. There was none. She'd become too good at this. After she left for her job at the design firm, I called in sick to work. For the first time in 5 years, I would not be at my desk. Instead, I drove to an electronics store in a part of town where no one would recognize me. "Home security?" the salesman asked when I described what I needed. "Something like that," I replied, paying cash for a small recording device and a tracking app for her phone. I didn't recognize myself in that moment, the suspicious husband, the man preparing to spy on his wife. But the alternative was to remain blind, a fool in his own home. Installing the tracking app took seconds once I had her phone password, her mother's birthday, unchanged since college. The recording device went under our bed, small enough to be invisible unless you were looking for it. That night, I pretended to work late while watching the little dot that represented Emily move across town. Not to Susan's apartment. To the Westlake Hotel. I sat in my office staring at that dot for 2 hours, imagining what was happening in that room with whom. When she came home, her hair was slightly damp, freshly showered. She smelled of her own perfume, a detail I hadn't expected. Careful. Methodical. She'd prepared for this lie. "How was Susan?" I asked. "Good. Same old drama with her boss." Emily kissed me lightly. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed early." I nodded, said I'd join her soon. Instead, I waited until her breathing deepened into sleep, then retrieved the recording device. With trembling fingers, I connected headphones and pressed play. The first sounds were mundane, Emily getting ready, humming absently. Then her phone rang. "Hey you," she said, her voice warm, intimate. "Adam's working late again. Meet me at 8? Pause. A laugh. "I know, David. I miss you too. David. My brother." My brother's name echoed in my mind like a gunshot in an empty room. David. The same David who stood beside me at our wedding, who helped me start our company, who came to every holiday dinner with that easy smile of his. I sat in the dark of my home office, the recording still playing though I barely heard it anymore. Memories washed over me with sickening clarity, David's lingering hugs with Emily at Christmas, their inside jokes I never quite understood, the way they'd volunteer to clean up together after family dinners. It was right in front of me, I whispered to the darkness. The signs had been there for months. David canceling our weekly lunches. Emily's sudden interest in yoga classes that left her glowing and relaxed. The coincidental meetings where I'd find them chatting in the kitchen when I returned from a shower or a phone call. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me. My company, our company. David and I had built it from nothing, working 18-hour days, sleeping on office floors when deadlines loomed. We shared everything, the risk, the debt, the eventual success. And now he was sharing my wife. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay beside Emily, studying the peaceful curve of her cheek, wondering how she could look so innocent while harboring such betrayal. In the pale dawn light, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them, not yet. First, I needed to understand how deep this deception went. At breakfast, I kissed Emily goodbye as usual, my lips touching her cheek while my stomach turned. I might be late tonight, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Client presentation. No problem, I replied, my voice impressively steady. Good luck. As soon as she left, I opened my laptop and checked the tracking app. Her little blue dot moved steadily toward her office, then stopped. I zoomed in. Not her office building, a coffee shop 2 blocks away. I grabbed my keys and a baseball cap I never wore. 20 minutes later, I was parked across the street, watching through my windshield as Emily sat at an outdoor table, checking her watch repeatedly. Then David appeared, wearing the charcoal suit I'd recommended he buy last year. He kissed her. Not a brotherly peck on the cheek, but deeply, his hands cupping her face as if she were precious. I felt strangely hollow as I raised my phone and took several clear photos of them together. They spoke intensely, heads close, before walking hand in hand to the boutique hotel next door. I didn't follow. Some details I didn't need to witness. Instead, I drove to our office building, my mind oddly calm as if operating on autopilot. Janet, our receptionist, looked surprised when I walked in. I thought you were taking the morning off, she said. Change of plans? I replied, forcing a smile. Is the financial team in yet? In my office, I closed the door and began examining our company accounts. David handled most of the financial operations, a division of labor we'd agreed on years ago. I trusted him completely. Until today. It took 2 hours of digging through records, but I found it. Small withdrawals at first, dating back 4 months. Then larger ones. A total of nearly $300,000, siphoned to an account I didn't recognize. The last withdrawal had been 3 days ago, $50,000. My phone buzzed with a notification from the tracking app. Emily was on the move again. Not to her office but back home. I quickly gathered my things, told Janet I was working remotely for the rest of the day, and headed home, arriving minutes before Emily. I sat in my car, watching as she entered our house with a small shopping bag. I gave her 10 minutes, then followed, entering quietly through the garage. From the bedroom doorway, I watched her packing a small suitcase, humming softly. The same tune she'd hummed in the bathroom recording. Early day? I asked, making her jump. Adam? You scared me. She pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide. Yes, my afternoon meetings were cancelled. She pushed the suitcase slightly behind her. I thought I'd organize the closet a bit. With a suitcase? I kept my tone light, curious. Oh, this old thing, she laughed too brightly. I'm setting aside clothes for donation. I nodded, pretended to believe her. I forgot some files. Heading back to the office now. Instead, I drove to a small legal office across town. The brass plaque beside the door read, Morrison and Associates, Family Law. The receptionist looked up as I entered. Can I help you? I need to speak with someone about divorce proceedings, I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. And I'll need financial forensics as well. It's complicated. Divorces usually are, she said kindly, passing me a clipboard. Mr. Morrison has an opening in 30 minutes. Can I get you some coffee while you wait? I declined the coffee but took a seat, filling out the forms with steady hands. My phone buzzed again, the tracking app. Emily was on the move, headed to a location I knew well. David's apartment. I opened my photo gallery and looked at the picture I'd taken earlier. My wife and my brother, locked in an embrace meant to destroy me. I felt oddly grateful for the evidence, clear, undeniable proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things. Mr. Ellis? The receptionist called. Mr. Morrison will see you now. I stood, straightening my jacket. It was time to build a trap for the 2 people I had trusted most in the world. The meeting with Morrison left me with a thick folder of paperwork and a clearer understanding of the battles ahead. He'd been sympathetically blunt. Document everything, secure assets, prepare for ugliness. I sat in my car in the law office parking lot, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back seemed older somehow, eyes shadowed with knowledge I never wanted. My phone chimed, a calendar reminder for a dinner with Emily I'd forgotten about. Our anniversary was next week, and we'd planned this pre-celebration at Maison, where we'd had our first date. The irony was almost laughable. But as I started the engine, a different plan formed. If Emily and David were plotting something beyond just an affair, something involving our finances, I needed to know exactly what. And to do that, I needed access to Emily's communications. I'm not proud of what I did next. I'd never considered myself the type of man who would invade someone's privacy, even a cheating spouse's. But self-preservation is a powerful motivator. Using the emergency key I'd had for years, I let myself into Emily's design studio after hours. Her computer was password protected, but I knew her patterns. Variations on her mother's birthday, always. 3 attempts later I was in. What I found froze the blood in my veins. Emails between Emily and David, dating back almost a year. Not just love notes and meeting arrangements but detailed plans about company assets. My company. Our company. A has no idea about the Beijing deal, David had written. When it closes next month, we can divert the initial payment. He never checks the Asian accounts. Emily's response, perfect. I can have the transfer paperwork ready. Just need his signature, which isn't hard to get. They were planning to sell our business out from under me. The company I'd built with my own hands, sacrificing weekends, holidays, sleep. While I'd been expanding our client base in Asia, David had apparently been setting up shadow accounts and forging documents with Emily's help. I forwarded everything to my secure email, then carefully logged out, leaving no trace of my visit. Back in my car, I called the one person who might help make sense of this tangle. Marcus Kahn speaking, came the clipped response. Marcus, it's Adam Ellis. I need your financial expertise. Off the books. Tonight, if possible. Marcus had been our company's first financial analyst before starting his own consultancy. More importantly, he was my friend, not David's. 2 hours later, we sat in a private room at the back of Kingsley's bar, surrounded by financial printouts and Marcus's growing look of concern. Adam, this is systematic, he said finally, tapping a spreadsheet. These aren't impulse withdrawals. This is a calculated extraction of capital, hidden behind legitimate transactions. He looked up. Someone who knows your business intimately is bleeding it dry. My brother, I said flatly. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, but he only nodded. The Beijing deal is the big one. If they divert that initial payment, we're talking 7 figures. My phone buzzed. Emily, we'll be home late. Client emergency. Don't wait up. The tracking app showed her at David's apartment again. I need to stop this, I said. And I need to do it legally. Marcus slid a business card across the table. Private investigator. Former financial crimes detective. She can help document everything properly. The next morning, Emily was unusually cheerful at breakfast, humming as she poured coffee. I've been thinking, she said casually, buttering her toast. I might take a girls' trip with Susan this weekend. Just a quick getaway to the coast. I smiled, matching her casualness. Sounds great. You deserve a break. You don't mind? I know we usually do something together on weekends. Not at all, I replied, watching her shoulders relax slightly. According to her emails with David, they plan to meet with the Beijing investors this weekend. Actually, I've got some work to catch up on anyway. As soon as she left for work, I called Morrison, then my bank. By noon, I had frozen our joint accounts for suspicious activity and transferred my personal funds to a new account at a different bank. Next, I visited our company's primary bank, where the manager knew me well. Mr. Ellis, he said, shaking my hand. What brings you in today? Security concerns, Ben, I explained smoothly. I need to implement dual authorization for all international transfers. Immediately. By evening, I had secured every financial document from our home office, storing them in a safe deposit box. I'd spoken with the PI Marcus recommended, a sharp-eyed woman named Veronica who asked precise questions and took detailed notes. And I'd consulted with our company's outside counsel about potential fraud by a company officer. When Emily returned home, I was cooking dinner as if nothing had changed. She kissed my cheek, her perfume mingling with a scent I recognized as David's cologne. Something smells amazing, she said, peering at the stove. Beef bourguignon, I answered. Thought I'd try something new. As we ate, she chatted about her day, client problems, office gossip. All lies. I nodded, asked appropriate questions, played my part. All while thinking about the financial trap I was setting, the evidence I was gathering, the life I was preparing to dismantle. Is everything okay? She asked suddenly. You seem distracted. I looked at my wife of 8 years, the woman who was planning to destroy me, and smiled. Everything's fine. Just thinking about the future. I was leaving Marcus's office after reviewing more financial records when I quite literally bumped into her. Coffee splashed between us, creating twin stains on both our shirts. I'm so sorry, I said automatically, reaching for the napkins at a nearby condiment station. It's fine really, she replied, dabbing at her blouse. When she looked up, her eyes widened slightly. Adam? Adam Ellis. It took me a moment to place her. Olivia? David's ex. She nodded, a wry smile twisting her lips. The very same. Though I prefer to be known for my legal career rather than my unfortunate romantic history. Olivia Chin. David had dated her for nearly 2 years before abruptly ending things 6 months ago. I'd met her a handful of times at company events. Sharp, witty, confident. I remembered Emily finding her intimidating. Let me buy you a replacement coffee, I offered, gesturing to her half-empty cup. Only if you'll join me, she countered. You look like you could use one too. 10 minutes later, we sat at a corner table, an awkward silence stretching between us. I hadn't seen Olivia since before the breakup. David had been particularly tight-lipped about what happened, unusual for him. He typically dissected his failed relationships in exhaustive detail. So, she finally said, wrapping both hands around her mug. How's your brother? David is. I hesitated, unsure how much to say. He's David. Something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition. That bad, huh? What happened between you two? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Sorry, that's none of my business. No, it's fine. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. The short version? He cheated. With a married woman. A bitter laugh escaped her. The oldest story in the book, right? My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. A married woman? She called him while we were at dinner once. I saw her name on his phone, Emily. He claimed she was a client. Olivia shook her head. I should have known then. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. When was this? About 8 months ago. She studied my face, her legal training making her observant. Adam, what's wrong? You've gone white. I placed my phone on the table between us, screen up, and pulled up the photo I'd taken of Emily and David kissing outside the coffee shop. Is this her? The woman he was seeing? Olivia stared at the image, her expression hardening. Yes, that's her. Her eyes lifted to mine, realization dawning. Oh my God. Emily she's your wife, isn't she? I nodded, unable to speak. I never knew her last name, Olivia whispered. David was so secretive about her. I just knew she was married and supposedly unhappy. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine briefly. Adam, I'm so sorry. It's worse than just an affair, I found myself saying. Something about Olivia, perhaps her legal mind, perhaps our shared betrayal, made me trust her. They're trying to defraud my company. Our company, David's and mine. Her back straightened, professional interest sparked. Tell me more. I gave her the condensed version, the late-night whispers, the tracking app, the financial discoveries. With each detail, her expression grew more focused, more determined. I'm a partner at Blackwell & Associates, she said when I finished. My specialty is matrimonial law and fraud cases. A slight smile curved her lips. Seems particularly fitting now, doesn't it? You're a divorce attorney? Among other things. She pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. And I'm very, very good at what I do. I studied her card. Why would you help me? I'm David's brother. Because what they're doing is wrong both legally and morally. She leaned forward. And because, between us, I'd like to see your brother face consequences for once in his charmed life. We spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Olivia's legal expertise complemented my evidence, filling gaps in my plan. She suggested additional documentation I needed, warned of potential pitfalls, outlined the likely counterarguments Emily and David would make. We should be seen together, she suggested as we prepared to leave. Make them nervous. If Emily thinks you're moving on, she and David might accelerate their plans, make mistakes. You want to pretend to date me? I asked, surprised. I'm suggesting we have dinner at Rossini's tomorrow night. It's where the city's legal community gathers on Thursdays. Her smile turned mischievous. News travels fast in this town. The next evening found us at a corner table at Rossini's, Olivia laughing at something I'd said. She looked different outside of coffee shops and legal discussions. More relaxed, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, wine glass cradled in elegant fingers. My phone buzzed halfway through our meal. Emily checking where I was, something she rarely did. I texted back casually, catching up with an old friend, don't wait up. Through the restaurant's front windows, I caught a glimpse of Emily walking past, peering inside. Our eyes met briefly before she hurried away, phone already pressed to her ear. She saw us, I told Olivia. Good. Olivia raised her glass slightly. Let the games begin. The tracking app confirmed what I already suspected. Emily went straight to David's apartment, their little dots converging on my screen like conspirators in the night. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I felt something beyond the shock and pain. Something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. The morning after my dinner with Olivia, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, with only the cleaning staff moving silently through the halls. Perfect for what I needed to do. I entered David's office using my master key. Everything was meticulously organized. My brother always maintained an image of perfect control. His desk was clear except for a family photo. David, me, our parents at last year's Christmas. We were all smiling. What a difference a year makes. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for until I found it, a slim folder hidden beneath a false bottom in his desk drawer. Inside were documents about our company's sale to Meridian Corp., our largest competitor. The deal was structured to transfer controlling interest while keeping me on as a figurehead. My signature appeared on several documents, signatures I had never provided. My hands trembled as I photographed each page with my phone. Emily's design background made her skilled with graphics and signatures. She'd obviously been busy. According to the timeline in the documents, they planned to finalize the sale next week, during Emily's supposed girls' trip with Susan. The initial payment would go to an offshore account I had no access to. I returned everything exactly as I'd found it and slipped out of the office just as the early arrivals began trickling in. My mind was racing, calculating moves and counter-moves like a chess player facing checkmate. By 9, I'd contacted our company's 3 other key partners, requesting an emergency confidential meeting at Olivia's law firm, Neutral Ground. By noon, I was sitting with them in a sleek conference room, laying out carefully selected pieces of evidence. This is... Margaret Chin, our operations director, struggled for words. Unbelievable, finished Richard Winters, head of development. David? Your own brother? The third partner, James Holden, leaned forward, eyes narrowed. These signatures, they appear legitimate. They're forgeries, Olivia explained, passing around a forensic analysis sheet Rush ordered. Excellent ones, but definitely fake. Why are we meeting here instead of at the office? James asked, always the most cautious of our partners. Because we don't know who else might be involved, I answered honestly. And because what we're about to do needs to remain completely confidential. Over the next hour, we crafted a counter-strategy. The partners were unanimously supportive, outraged by David's betrayal of the company they'd helped build. By the time we finished, a unified plan was in place. When I returned to the office, David was waiting in my room, looking uncharacteristically anxious. Where have you been? He asked too casually. Tried to reach you all morning. Meeting with clients, I lied smoothly. Everything okay? Actually, I wanted to discuss an interesting opportunity with Meridian. He leaned against my desk. They've approached me about a potential merger. Could be huge for us. I kept my face neutral with effort. Meridian? Our competitor? Doesn't sound like a natural fit. That's what I thought initially, he said, warming to his rehearsed pitch. But their Asian markets complement ours perfectly. We'd be positioned for massive expansion. I nodded thoughtfully. Send me the proposal. I'll look it over this weekend. Actually, he hesitated, they're on a tight timeline. There's a preliminary meeting tomorrow I thought you might attend. Tomorrow's impossible, I said, watching his expression fall slightly. I've got back-to-back meetings. But I trust your judgment, David. Always have. The relief that washed over his face made my stomach turn. My own brother, so easily reassured that his betrayal was proceeding as planned. That evening, Emily was waiting when I arrived home, candlelight flickering over a beautifully set table. The aroma of my favorite dish, coq au vin, filled the house. What's the occasion? I asked, hanging up my coat. Do I need an occasion to do something nice for my husband? She smiled, approaching to straighten my tie. Her fingers lingered on my chest. I feel like we've been ships passing lately. I miss you. I forced myself to smile, to place my hands on her waist as I'd done countless times before. I miss you too. Over dinner, she asked carefully crafted questions about work, about our finances, about my plans for the company. I answered with half-truths and misdirections, all while maintaining eye contact, letting her believe she was extracting valuable information. After too much wine, which I'd mostly poured into the potted plant behind me, Emily suggested we reconnect upstairs. I begged off, claiming exhaustion from the day. Rain check? I asked, kissing her forehead. I promised to make it worth the wait. Disappointment flickered across her face before she masked it with a smile. Of course. Get some rest. Later, I lay on the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman downstairs with the wife I thought I knew. 8 years of marriage reduced to a manipulation. A means to an end. My phone vibrated with a text from Olivia. Everything in place for tomorrow. Ready? I typed back a single word. Ready? For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like anticipation. Tomorrow would bring pain and confrontation, yes. But also, finally, the truth. Morning arrived with a text from Margaret. David called emergency shareholders meeting. 1 hour. Conference room A. I stared at my phone, pulse quickening. David was accelerating his plans, exactly as Olivia had predicted he might after seeing us together. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the dark navy one Emily always said made me look powerful. Today I would need every advantage. As I knotted my tie, Emily appeared in the doorway of our bedroom, still in her silk robe. Emergency meeting? She asked, watching me in the mirror. David's called the shareholders together, I replied, keeping my voice casual. Probably about the Meridian proposal. Her eyes widened slightly before she controlled her expression. On a Saturday? Must be important. Apparently. I turned to face her. Any plans for today? Just errands, she said, smoothing my lapel with practiced affection. Good luck with the meeting. 20 minutes later, I stood in the office parking lot, watching as David's car arrived. He looked confident, almost smug as he nodded to me before entering the building. I waited another 5 minutes, then called Olivia. He's here. Everyone else. In position, she confirmed. Remember, let him present first. We need him to commit to the lies. The conference room was nearly full when I entered. Our partners, major shareholders, and David's carefully selected allies sat around the large oval table. David stood at the head, presentation materials arranged before him. Adam? He greeted me with false warmth. Glad you could make it on such short notice. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, taking a seat not at my usual place beside him, but halfway down the table. His eyebrow raised slightly at this deviation. Before we begin, I said clearly, I believe we're missing someone important. David frowned. Everyone required is here, Adam? Not quite. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. The conference room door opened and Olivia walked in, professional and poised in a charcoal suit, leather portfolio in hand. Sorry I'm late. What is she doing here? David's face flushed with anger and surprise. Olivia Chin is here as my legal representative, I announced to the room. Given the nature of today's discussion, I felt legal counsel was appropriate. Murmurs rippled through the gathered shareholders. David's jaw tightened visibly. Now, I nodded to him, please continue, David. You called this meeting. He recovered quickly, slipping back into his practiced charm as he launched into his presentation about the extraordinary opportunity with Meridian. The merger would position us for global expansion and maximize shareholder value. All the right corporate buzzwords, delivered with practiced sincerity. I watched the faces around the table, some nodding in agreement, others more skeptical. Our 3 partners maintained perfect poker faces, exactly as we'd planned. When David finished, he looked around confidently. The Meridian representatives are waiting in the next room. With your approval, we can move forward immediately. Before we vote, I said, standing slowly, I have some relevant information to share. David's smile faltered slightly. Adam, we don't want to keep them waiting. This will only take a moment. I nodded to Olivia, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. Inside you'll find evidence that this is not a merger, but a sale that would transfer controlling interest to Meridian while systematically removing current leadership, starting with me. The room erupted in confused conversation. David's face hardened. Adam is clearly misunderstanding. He began, but I cut him off. You'll also find evidence of approximately $700,000 diverted from company accounts over the past 6 months. I met the eyes of key shareholders. Money taken by the person who arranged this so-called merger. These are serious allegations, one shareholder said, flipping through the documents with a frown. They're also complete fabrications, David snapped, his composure cracking. My brother has been under tremendous pressure lately. Play the recordings, I said quietly to Olivia. She connected her phone to the room's sound system. Emily's voice filled the room. Once the deal closes, we'll have access to the full payment. Adam will be completely cut out. Then David's voice, he's clueless. By the time he realizes what's happened, we'll be gone. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at me, shock giving way to fury. You bugged me, he hissed. No, I replied steadily. I bugged my bedroom, where my wife took your calls. Understanding dawned on the faces around the table. This wasn't just corporate betrayal, it was personal. David lunged forward, knocking over his chair. You self-righteous bastard. Security guards appeared at the door, another part of our plan. Mr. Ellis, the head of security addressed David, not me. I need to escort you from the building. Your access has been revoked, effective immediately. You can't do this, David sputtered, looking around for allies, finding none. This company is as much mine as his. The board will decide that, Margaret said coldly, rising from her seat. After a full investigation. As security led my brother away, his face contorted with rage, I received a text alert from the tracking app. Emily was on the move, heading home in a hurry. The notification made me smile grimly. She must have heard from David. Ready for phase 2? Olivia asked quietly beside me. I nodded, gathering my things as the shareholders continued reviewing the evidence, shocked conversations filling the room. Let's go, I said. She'll be packing by now. The drive home felt surreal. Adrenaline still coursed through my veins after the showdown with David, but beneath it lay a strange calm. In the passenger seat, Olivia reviewed our strategy one last time. Remember, she cautioned, record everything. No matter what she says or does. I nodded, pulling into our driveway. Emily's car was parked haphazardly, one wheel on the lawn, so unlike her usual precision. The front door stood slightly ajar. Wait here, I told Olivia. This part one need to do alone. Adam, she touched my arm lightly, be careful. People are most dangerous when cornered. I entered my home quietly, activating the recording app on my phone. The sounds of frantic movement led me upstairs to our bedroom, where Emily was throwing clothes into a suitcase. Designer dresses, jewelry, and the expensive watch I'd given her for our 5th anniversary. I stood in the doorway watching her for a moment before speaking. Going somewhere? She whirled around, hand flying to her throat. Adam, you startled me. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating. I was just organizing some donations. With our passports? I nodded to the documents clutched in her left hand. A beat of silence stretched between us. Then her demeanor changed, the panic replaced by cold anger. How long have you known? She asked, dropping all pretense. About you and David? Since that night you whispered to him on the phone. About the company fraud? That took me a little longer. She laughed bitterly. Always so observant. So detail-oriented. It's what made you successful, and impossible to live with. Was any of it real? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Our marriage. Something flickered across her face, regret perhaps, or just annoyance at being caught. In the beginning. Before I realized what you really cared about. And what was that? Your precious company. Your reputation. Your plans. She spat the words like venom. Never me. Never us. So you decided to take it all. I kept my voice level. With my brother. David understands me. A defensive edge crept into her voice. He sees me, not as an accessory to his perfect life, but as a partner. A partner in crime, I corrected. You do know he's been detained by company security? The shareholders have seen everything. The forged documents, the diverted funds, the recordings. Her face paled. Recordings? You should be more careful about where you take phone calls. Our bedroom wasn't as private as you thought. The calculation returned to her eyes. In one fluid motion, she abandoned the suitcase and moved toward me, her hand caressing my cheek. Adam, please. David manipulated me. Made me believe you didn't care anymore. Her eyes welled with tears. We can fix this. Start over. I stepped back from her touch. 8 years of marriage and you still don't know me at all if you think I'd fall for that. Her face hardened instantly, the tears vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. You've always been so self-righteous. So perfect. She stalked back to the suitcase. Fine. Take the company. I never wanted it anyway. It's not that simple, Emily. There are consequences for fraud. For stealing. Stealing? She laughed harshly. I was your wife. Half of everything is mine by right. Not the company funds you diverted. Not the money you helped David embezzle. She froze, then slowly turned to face me. You can't prove that was me. Your signature is on the transfer documents. Your computer contains the forged approvals. I met her gaze steadily. And the offshore account is in both your names. Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. With surprising speed, she grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight from the nightstand and hurled it at my head. I ducked, the object shattering against the wall behind me. She charged forward, nails aimed at my face. I caught her wrists, struggling to restrain her without causing harm. I gave you everything, she screamed, twisting in my grip. My youth, my talent. I could have been someone without you holding me back. Emily, stop. Her knee connected with my stomach, doubling me over. As I gasped for breath, she ran to the dresser, yanking open the drawer where I kept an old service pistol, a relic from my brief military stint that she'd always hated. The drawer was empty. Looking for this? Olivia stood in the doorway, the unloaded gun held carefully in a handkerchief. Behind her, 2 police officers appeared, their expressions grim. Emily Ellis. One officer stepped forward. You're under arrest for assault and attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Emily's eyes locked with mine as they recited her rights, hatred burning in their depths. This isn't over, she hissed as they led her away. You'll never be free of me. I sank onto the edge of the bed, surrounded by the scattered remnants of our life together. Clothes strewn across the floor, shattered crystal glittering like diamonds, wedding photos knocked askew during the struggle. Olivia sat beside me, her shoulder gently touching mine. You did what you had to do, she said quietly. I know. I stared at the empty doorway where my wife had disappeared. I just never imagined it would end like this. Outside, the police car pulled away, taking with it the woman I had once promised to love forever. The house fell silent, empty of everything but ghosts and broken promises. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade imposing against the clear blue sky. 3 months had passed since that fateful confrontation in our bedroom. 3 months of depositions, evidence review and sleepless nights. Today marked the beginning of both divorce proceedings and the fraud case against Emily and David. Ready? Olivia asked, her briefcase clutched in one hand, a reassuring smile on her face. I nodded, straightening my tie. As ready as I'll ever be. The courtroom was already crowded when we entered. Financial fraud involving prominent business owners had attracted local media attention. I spotted familiar faces from our social circle, some offering sympathetic nods, others avoiding my gaze entirely. Emily sat at the defense table, nearly unrecognizable. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup, replaced by a modest navy suit and subdued appearance. Beside her sat Gerald Walsh, a divorce attorney known for his aggressive tactics and theatrical courtroom style. David was noticeably absent. His case had been separated from Emily's after he'd agreed to testify against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. Betrayal, it seemed, was his only consistent trait. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Marissa Winters entered, her expression stern as she surveyed the courtroom. What followed was a masterclass in character assassination. Walsh painted me as controlling, obsessive, paranoid, a husband who spied on his innocent wife and fabricated evidence in a jealous rage. Mr. Ellis installed tracking software on his wife's phone, Walsh declared dramatically. He recorded her private conversations. He monitored her every move like a stalker, not a spouse. Emily played her part perfectly, dabbing at tearful eyes as Walsh described our troubled marriage and my fixation on control. Several of our mutual friends had been called as witnesses, including Susan, who claimed Emily had confided in her about feeling trapped and afraid. Did my client make mistakes? Yes, Walsh conceded with practiced humility. She sought comfort outside her marriage, a marriage that had become a prison. But financial fraud? Embezzlement? These are the desperate accusations of a man who couldn't bear losing control. When Olivia rose for cross-examination, her demeanor was calm, methodical, the perfect contrast to Walsh's theatrics. Mrs. Ellis, she began, You claim your husband was controlling, yet bank records show you spent over $20,000 monthly with no oversight. Is that consistent with being controlled? Emily shifted uncomfortably. Material possessions aren't freedom. You had your own car, your own studio, traveled alone frequently. Phone records show no checking in with your husband during these trips. Olivia approached the witness stand. Does that sound like someone monitoring your every move? As Olivia continued her methodical dismantling of Emily's claims, I noticed several jurors exchanging glances. The narrative was shifting. The turning point came on the third day when Martin Zhao took the stand. I'd never met him before, a businessman from Beijing who dealt with David regarding the acquisition. Mr. Ellis, David Ellis, told me his brother was fully aware of the transaction, Zhao testified. When I expressed concern about meeting the other co-founder, he assured me it wasn't necessary. And Mrs. Ellis's role? Olivia asked. She was present at 2 meetings. She showed me documents with signatures, supposedly from Adam Ellis, authorizing the sale. He glanced at me apologetically. I had no reason to doubt their authenticity. By the end of the week, 3 former victims of similar schemes orchestrated by David came forward, describing his pattern of manipulation and fraud. The final blow to Emily's defense came from David himself. Looking haggard in his prison jumpsuit, he reluctantly admitted the fraud had been a joint plan between him and Emily. Whose idea was it initially? Olivia asked. David hesitated, glancing at Emily, whose glare could have melted steel. Emily's, he finally said. She approached me about finding a buyer for the company behind Adam's back. Emily's composure finally shattered. She stood abruptly, pointing at David. You lying bastard. It was your plan from the beginning. Mrs. Ellis. Judge Winters slammed her gavel. Control yourself or you'll be removed from this courtroom. Emily sank back into her chair, but the damage was done. Her outburst, coupled with David's testimony and the mountain of evidence, sealed her fate. When the verdict came the following week, it was decisive. The divorce was granted on grounds of adultery and fraudulent behavior. Emily received no alimony, no share of the business, and was ordered to pay restitution for the embezzled funds. Additionally, she received a 2-year suspended sentence for her role in the fraud. David wasn't so lucky. Despite his cooperation, his more direct role in the embezzlement earned him 3 years in federal prison. As we left the courthouse, reporters called out questions, cameras flashing in the afternoon sun. Mr. Ellis, how does it feel to win? I paused, Olivia's supportive hand on my arm. When? I'd lost my marriage, my brother, friendships, and any sense of trust one once had. The company was intact, my finances secure, but the cost had been enormous. There are no winners here, I replied quietly. Only survivors. 6 months passed like a slow-healing wound. Spring turned to summer, then faded into autumn. The world moved on even when I felt stuck in amber. The company recovered, thrived even after I restructured the leadership with Margaret as my new COO. The scandal made headlines for a few weeks before being replaced by newer, juicier stories. Life continued its relentless forward march. I stood at my office window watching the October rain trace patterns down the glass. My new corner office offered a panoramic view of the city, a daily reminder of what I'd managed to salvage from the wreckage of betrayal. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Olivia entered, a stack of legal documents under her arm. The last of the paperwork, she announced, setting them on my desk. Once you sign these, the company restructuring will be complete. David's shares will be officially redistributed among the remaining partners. Good, I nodded, taking the pen she offered. The sooner we erase his name from everything, the better. 6 months as my legal counsel had softened the professional boundaries between us. Olivia no longer wore her power suits to our meetings, opting instead for casual blazers and jeans. Today, her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face. How are you doing? She asked, perching on the edge of my desk. And don't say fine like you always do. I managed a small smile. Better. The house sold last week. That's great news, she said. New beginnings. New apartment, new office, new life. I agreed, signing the final document with a flourish. Almost too many new things to keep track of. My phone chimed with an email notification. I glanced down, then froze. Adam? What is it? I turned the screen toward her. Emily. After the trial, Emily had disappeared from public view. The last I'd heard, she'd moved to the West Coast, far from the whispers and stares of a city that had watched her disgrace splashed across local news. What does she want? Olivia's voice hardened. I opened the email, scanning its contents quickly. She wants to meet. Says she needs closure before she can move on. After everything she did? Olivia shook her head in disbelief. The woman has no shame. Should I ignore it? Olivia considered this, her legal mind calculating scenarios. Legally, there's nothing more she can do to you. The divorce is final, the financial settlement's complete. She hesitated. But emotionally? Meeting her could reopen wounds that are just starting to heal. I stared at the email, at Emily's familiar writing style, direct, slightly demanding even when asking for a favor. 6 months ago, these words would have sent me spiraling into anger or despair. Now, I felt oddly detached, as if reading about a stranger. I think I should see her, I decided. One last conversation to put this chapter completely behind me. Then I'm coming with you, Olivia said firmly. Liv, you don't have to. As your attorney, I advise having a witness. Her tone was professional, but her eyes held concern. As your friend, I don't trust her not to try something. We arranged to meet Emily at a busy restaurant downtown, neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. I arrived early, securing a table with clear sightlines to all exits, old habits from months of paranoia dying hard. Olivia positioned herself at the bar, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give us privacy. When Emily walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, perfectly styled woman I'd married. This Emily looked thinner, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her hair shorter and unstyled. Her eyes found mine immediately. For a moment she seemed uncertain, then straightened her shoulders and approached. Adam, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Thank you for coming. You said you needed closure, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. So talk. She flinched slightly at my directness. I deserved that. Her fingers fidgeted with her napkin. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not that it changes anything, but you should hear it anyway. Is that what David told you to say during your prison visits? A bitter laugh escaped her. David hasn't spoken to me since the trial. He took what money we had left and vanished after his release. She shook her head. Turns out I wasn't the great love of his life after all. Just a convenient accomplice. Some petty part of me enjoyed hearing this, though I tried to suppress it. I lost everything, Adam, she continued, a tremor in her voice. My career, my reputation. I'm living in a studio apartment, working retail jobs that barely cover rent. What do you want from me, Emily? Forgiveness? Sympathy? Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something genuine there, regret, perhaps, or simply exhaustion. I want another chance, she whispered. We could start over. Clean slate. For one dizzy moment, I remembered the Emily I fell in love with, her laugh, her creativity, the way she used to look at me as if I were the answer to every question. Then reality crashed back like a cold wave. No, I said quietly. What we had is gone. It was gone long before I discovered your affair. Her face crumpled slightly before she composed herself. I was afraid you'd say that. 1 year. That's how long it took for my life to completely transform. 365 days since I'd watched Emily being led away in handcuffs, since my brother had betrayed me, since everything I thought I knew had crumbled beneath my feet. Standing on the terrace of my new home, I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The house was smaller than the one I'd shared with Emily, but it was mine alone, a modern structure of glass and steel perched on a hillside overlooking the city. The company had not just recovered from David's attempted sabotage, it had flourished. Our restructured leadership team, with Margaret as COO and James handling Asian operations, had doubled our market share. The scandal had eventually become a footnote, overshadowed by our innovations and success. I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet moment before heading to campus. Teaching a guest seminar at the business school had been Olivia's suggestion. Share what you've learned, she'd urged. Not just about business, but about resilience. To my surprise, I'd found genuine satisfaction in mentoring young entrepreneurs, in sharing both successes and hard lessons. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, running a few minutes late. See you at 7? I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. 3 months into our relationship, and Sophia still maintained her charming punctuality and warning about her lateness. We'd met at one of my seminars. She was a literature professor with a sharp mind and warmer heart, who challenged my presentation on corporate ethics with thoughtful questions. Coffee after class had turned into dinner, which became weekend hikes and quiet evenings discussing everything from 19th-century novels to quantum physics. Unlike Emily, Sophia knew nothing of my past when we met. To her, I was simply Adam, the guest lecturer with the dry sense of humor. By the time she learned about the scandal, stumbling across an old news article online, we'd established something real, something based on genuine connection rather than calculation. Everyone has a past, she'd said simply. I'm more interested in your present. My phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code belonged to David's former rehabilitation center. Adam Ellis, I answered cautiously. Adam, it's David. My breath caught. 1 year since I'd heard my brother's voice. What do you want? I kept my tone neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, he said, his voice strained. I'm out now and part of my recovery program is making amends. I was hoping we could meet. I don't think that's a good idea, I replied. Please, Adam. Just coffee. A public place. I owe you an explanation at least. I thought of Olivia's advice when Emily had reached out. Closure works both ways. Perhaps I needed this too, not for David but for myself. One coffee, I conceded. That's all. After hanging up, I sent Olivia a quick message about David's call. Even though she was no longer my attorney, officially becoming a business partner 6 months ago, she remained my closest confidant. Her response was immediate. Want me to come with you? No, I need to do this alone, I replied. But thanks. A notification on my news app caught my attention. Tech entrepreneur charged with fraud and theft. The accompanying photo showed Emily's new husband being led from his offices in handcuffs. The article mentioned that his wife, unnamed but clearly Emily, was being investigated as a possible accomplice. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a weary confirmation of what I already knew. People rarely change their fundamental nature. Emily had found another wealthy target, another scheme. The pattern continued, only with different players. Turning off my phone, I headed inside to prepare for my evening with Sophia. She was bringing a book she'd been eager to share, something about trust and healing that had reminded her of conversations we'd had. As I changed my shirt, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The man looking back was different from the one who had discovered his wife's whispered phone calls a year ago. Older in some ways, certainly, with a few more strands of silver at my temples. But also steadier, more grounded in himself. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Sophia never needed to use her key, preferring the small ceremony of arrival and greeting. When I opened the door, she stood there with wind-blown hair and bright eyes, a wrapped package tucked under her arm. Sorry I'm late, she said, kissing me lightly. Faculty meeting ran long. You're exactly on time, I replied, drawing her inside. Later, as we sat on the terrace watching the stars appear, Sophia's head resting comfortably against my shoulder, I realized something profound. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately led me here, to this quieter, more authentic happiness. To a woman who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. To a life rebuilt on honesty rather than illusion. I wasn't a victim of circumstances any longer, but the architect of my own contentment. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, such wounds never heal without leaving scars. But those scars no longer define me. For the first time since that night of whispers in the darkness, I felt completely at peace.